as if it had all been imagined for you.
I like to feel that I belong to the things you love.
You love 12 Oaks as I do.
I'm sure there were places where slaves were mistreated. Somehow I don't feel like that's the case, because everyone in my family and your family is so kind. You know, I have great black friends, and I've always gotten along with them. I don't know if it was the way I was raised, with playing with them, with my friends across the creek or whatever, but we're just, I just look at the way people address it that have never been lived with friends like that, you know, and grown up with them and had baggage that they carried from other generations. So when they talk about those issues, sometimes I don't know quite what they're saying. Yeah. Because maybe I just didn't see it clearly because I was too close to the issue or something, but I just have my own strong feelings about that stuff. I'm sorry.
And see, that's the thing about America, you know, is that we haven't surrendered to the American ideal. It's a hard message to take in because it involves a change in the way that things are organized.
You had to have the mythology of the happy slave in order to keep the system running. I mean, if you confront the fact that these folk hate you and hate where they are and want to kill you, it's hard to wake up every morning and keep going. And so you know, it's natural to try to convince yourself that they like it and they know they're better off here than they're back in Africa, you know, being heathens and all this stuff.
Yet the myth of the happy slave was not just specific to slave-owning families or even the South. For decades, it was an ingredient in the popular entertainment embraced by the whole nation.
I'd walk a million miles for one of your smiles, oh my man.
In effect, the plantation was an economic and social reality that engendered an astonishingly potent and long-lived mythology. Planter families like the Hintons mythologized themselves as the South's own English nobility, dashing romantic cavaliers in contrast to the North's pinched Puritans.
The Hintons were some of the first people to start creating a kind of plantation culture in North Carolina. In developing their society and their culture, they used the only model they had, which was English society, with all of its class structure and its formalities, and they tried to reproduce as much of that as they could here. I mean, one of the ironies and contradictions of this country is that at the same time that we were developing all this language about equality, we were working very hard to create as hierarchical a society as we could.
My general manager at Mara Farms was a man named Joe Ikaguchi. He was Japanese. In his family, he came over here in the 1900s and bought farms in the valley outside of Los Angeles. What is it called? The
San Fernando Valley.
San Fernando Valley. And they were strawberry farmers. And Joe, at the time when he grew up, this is World War II now, he went to Redlands College and became, when World War II came along, he went in the Army, and he stayed in the Army for about 20 years and became a colonel in the Army, and then came to work for us. His family was one of the niece, they were Icy, in other words, they were first generation. He was a Nisi, but their property was confiscated by the government and given to somebody else. But now the next generation, his daughter, Ruby, she lives in Los Angeles. She makes about $300 grand a year as a published, what do you call them?
PR person, maybe?
Well, no, she advises companies on the inner workings of the political system in Los Angeles.
Oh.
She's a lobbyist.
A lobbyist.
And she makes a goddamn fortune. He's got
some of the paradigm that's going to be shifted here.
He's got 2 or 3 kids that have done extremely well. So he's really gotten back on his feet, you know, although he was a colonel in fighting the Japanese in Asia, and he was on the ground as a counterintelligence agent, and here his family had lost their property in the United States.
Oh, you know, actually, they probably had lost their property in the San Joaquin Valley around Fresno if they were strawberry farmers.
Yeah, well, maybe that was it.
Yeah, because
Capitalism.
Oh yeah, the capitalism has such a flexible framework. I saw that capitalism was assimilated just in a few years. I had gone to China in 1978 for the first time to build an American motel, and to see the party members adapt toward the capital model over the 4 years that I was working in China. It was amazing, the flexibility within its framework, and there certainly is a lot of room in the matrix for applying or even adapting itself to the great communist distribution system that I saw in place in China when I first went in 1978. It was just a piece of cake.
Buck told me that you didn't have two bicycles until everybody had one bicycle. You know, so that's what he meant.
You know, like in their, like in their production brigade, and
well, there were a lot of bicycles over there.
Yeah,
particularly in Chengdu. God, I nearly got run over.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, you know, like I'm not worried about the future of the world because, you know, there's just such incredible wealth to be used. You know, even in this country, there is almost 500,000 square feet for each citizen, and every year on that 500,000 square feet, there is about $2 million of energy in the way of sunlight and wind at the rate of a dime per kilowatt hour, and rain at the rate of a penny a gallon, which is not unusual evaluations. But you know, this is a very rich country, and this planet can the United States, and even in China, is that this planet can, you know, support many times more people if we learn to use the energy that is available. And
yeah, I study life in the universe, and the book that you have, you know, UFO Contact from IARGA, if you read through the book, you could see that they have concentrated their living conditions into communities in these huge enclosed communities, apartment buildings that are huge. And they had an interesting idea to offer, is that they've discovered that they can ascend in their evolution once they're properly supporting a certain number of individuals on the planet. And so it sort of goes into what Buck was saying, you know, is that, you know, everything is enhanced as long as the means of production, capitalism, and everything else is beneficial. The capitalists are good corporate citizens.
Strangely, once the Confederacy was crushed and the old plantation way of life destroyed forever, its mythology rebounded in an even more powerful form, a form that found its most congenial medium in the movies. D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, the 1915 epic that's called the movie's first masterpiece, used an idealized image of the Old South to defend white supremacy. Its poisonous politics, however, were already outmoded by the time 1939's Gone with the Wind conjured Hollywood's most romantic and influential image of the plantation South.
fiddly-dee. War, war, war. This war talk spoiling all the fun at every party this spring. I get so bored I could scream.
Oh, it was just the most wonderful thing in the whole wide world. We had front row seats in the balcony, and it was wonderful.
You seem to belong here, as if it had all been imagined for you.
I like to feel that I belong to the things you love.
You love 12 Oaks as I do.
Yes, Ashley. I love it as more than a house. It's a whole world that wants only to be graceful and beautiful.
It's so unaware that it may not last forever.
Did you identify with Scarlett O'Hara?
I thought I was nicer than Scarlett O'Hara.
If I had to lie, steal, cheat, or kill, as God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again.
Which
now
we don't have.
We have 3 minutes left,
right
John.
now.
Can you sell Buck on investing in free energy?
Can I sell Buck? Yes.
What would you say?
I could say
'Cause
Buck.
He's just
I could say Buck. The next
he
time.
explained capitalism.
The next time you go back to China, if you'll research it, you'll find that at the grassroots level there, small inventors have started building zero-point energy machines in a controlled society, which still exists in China, since it's still a communist state, I guess you could say, the People's Republic of China, is that information can never get out to the outside world unless the government intended it to. Something that's paradigm changing, world changing. If you do the research, you'll see that some Chinese citizens now are building the zero-point energy devices, and to my way of thinking, that's an implicit agreement with the government that might be a good area to develop. And so,
well, the only low energy engines that I know of that are being built there are for my vegetable oil diesels, and I've found that it is just so easy to produce power off of vegetable oil, and certainly there is so much more potential there.
right.
For
in China?
The point is,
China isn't married to
it's a renewable resource.
Yeah.
That's
renewable.
Yeah.
But
China isn't married to a high-performance engine philosophy.
But John was saying, like turpentine, you couldn't be growing a lot of trees, pine trees, is a renewable thing.
What I was pointing out was that if we burned the trees to produce the energy we have today, we wouldn't have any more trees. We were very lucky to uncover the reservoirs of coal, of mostly oil, but coal also.
Well, turpentine, you don't have to kill a tree to get turpentine.
Well, that's true.
Is that just maple syrup? It's only sap.
Well, and it was a big industry here in Bay County for a long time. It's a restrictive industry though, because you have to grow trees, and trees are not a particularly economic way of using the land, as St. Joe has found out.
Well, that's only because you're not taking into the costs of using the fossil fuels in agriculture. Trees, as a part of permaculture, would, in the long run, use less energy to produce more energy, because the trees are just harvesting the sunshine for you, and producing the volatile sap that you.
Certainly, if you could use enzymes to use the waste product of trees and produce fuel, that would be a great step forward. Vegetable matter. For instance, in shrimp farming, which I'm just getting out of it, one of the reasons it works is that you can use a land-based feed for the shrimp, whereas in fish farming, you're using live fish on a lower scale to feed the fish you would like, and that doesn't help the overall production of fish in the ocean at all. You're going to have to go to a land-based feed for fish. So I'm with you. It depends. It really depends on what products you use out of the trees. You certainly can't burn them for energy.
Yeah, fortunately, since China put so many unemployed people to work planting the same Monterey pine trees that you see along the shore here, is that there'll be a vast reservoir of turpentine available for low combustion or low compression
engines,
gasoline engines, just like what Honda had built when he was starting off in the business. Personally, I favor diesel engines, but even though I've owned many more Honda engines than diesel engines.
Now, John, both Buck and John Cheshire had talked about other energy sources, and Buck said that you're essentially harvesting the energy of the sun.
Right.
And you were talking about the sun being hydrogen-based. And then you said, where does hydrogen come from? Can you just make some comment about tapping that energy source? Because I'm seeing all of a sudden, as the three of us, or me and the three of you, I'm seeing how organic free energy
hydrogen
is.
just occurs in our universe. It's the most plentiful molecule in our universe, right, John?
It comes hydrogen is a creation of energy.
Well, hydrogen can be used to create energy, like in a fuel cell. You combine it with an oxidizer, and it produces electricity.
But you have
and as
to
a
create
byproduct is water.
You have to create the hydrogen in the first place.
Well, you got to find a source for it, and that's getting around to my point. My point is that if you have a system of renewable energy, like propose that hydrogen, whatever the source may be, is renewable, then renewable means that that's an ecosystem of its own. It's a cycle there. It's generated and reproduced, and you could have bacteria that produce hydrogen, and then you could have all the byproducts absorbed back in the ecosystem with no carbon footprint. And my problem with burning fuels, whether they be renewable or not, is that you're increasing the carbon footprint, which is the disaster we see in our environment.
Well,
right now.
you're talking of burning hydrogen, though, and that creates some byproducts you don't want.
Heat and water, or electricity and water.
Right, but also in the sun, it creates radiation products which are benign. They're short-lived.
Well, even though you create a carbon footprint, burning vegetable oil and turpentine for the gasoline engines, or even alcohol for that matter, is that the source of it comes from plants that convert the carbon dioxide into air.
CO2, right?
Yeah, the photosynthesis has a mitigating effect on the carbon footprint, and also it also gives you an easy vehicle to store the excess carbon that has been released in the air from the premature use of the fossil fuels. Fossil fuels have been stored for these millions of years, and therefore, by storing, by carbon banking these fossil fuels, is that you allowed the planet to cool off rather than burning it off to heat up again.
Well, right. That was my proviso for.
Up in the South, I was always fascinated by movies depicting the region in its conflict-torn past. Yet at a certain point, I became aware that all of Hollywood's visions represented the viewpoints of outsiders. Some movies romanticized the South, others caricatured or disparaged it. Always fascinating to moviegoers, the myth never stopped evolving.
I think the South itself worked very hard to generate the mythology and to keep the mythology going. You know, the Daughters of the Confederacy, all of that kind of mentality. I think they worked very hard to keep that mythology going. But I think its distribution to the rest of the country was through movies.
By the 1960s, in films like Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, the plantation was the emblem of a derelict gentry and its gothic psychodramas.
Idiot. You wretched idiot. He's dead. And you killed him.
I was born in this time to never be free.
In the next decade, Mandingo revealed the brutalities of slavery in a way that conveniently meshed with the movie's new taste for sex and violence.
Hammond, can I ask you something?
Mm-hmm.
When our sucker growed up, can he go free?
The mythic South and its primary architectural icon have become so ingrained in our imaginations that it's alongside these stories that were passed down, others have come to light since Charlie and Dina moved back.
Charles Lewis Hinton was twice treasurer of North Carolina in the early 1840s and then again in the late 1840s. He was a very important man, and he actually built the house for David Hinton. When we had lived here for just a short while, we got a call from a gentleman who said, "I understand that you have a portrait of Charles Lewis Hinton, and I'd like to see it. I've studied a lot about your family." And I said, "Sure, we'll be here this afternoon." Sure enough, he shows up, knocks on the door, a very nice-looking, well-dressed, 70-ish black man, and he had a bunch of papers, and he was talked a lot about Charles Lewis Hinton. Well, we talked about it in the library, and he asked then, "Can I see the portrait?" And so I said, "Sure." And we came in and we looked at the portrait, and he dug in. He came out with a photograph of his grandfather. And sure enough, his grandfather bears a very close resemblance to Charles Lewis Hinton. His grandmother always told the story that he was the son of Mr. Charlie and the cook, and that he got to ride around on Mr. Charlie's horse while he was overseeing the plantation. I think he was a very special person. Not long after that, he died. And so I don't know whether he shared that information with his family or not. All we know is that there's a very strong family resemblance, and that was not an uncommon practice back then.
This is another aspect of plantation reality as it continues to evolve, confronting the aftermath of slavery and the fact that Midway bred two sets of Hintons, one black and one white.
This whole experience for me is still very strange. I mean, I'm still absorbing this.
One day in the New York Times, I happened to read a letter from a professor of African American Studies at New York University. That was how I came to meet Dr. Robert Hinton.
I always assumed that I would meet somebody from the Hinton family, but actually meeting someone is just like unreal, and I mean, I don't know how to respond.
He believes his grandfather was born a slave at Midway, and he seems as fascinated as I am with the plantation and its contemporary resonances.
If the South is ever going to move forward, it has to reconcile. There has to be reconciliation between, you and me, for example. One of the reasons I chose the dissertation topic I did, which is about the transition from slave to free labor, was to try to understand the experience of my father's family. Where did my grandfather come from? What kind of circumstances? And then looking at my ancestry and realizing I had to also deal with the fact that I had Cherokee ancestry, I have Irish ancestry, I have Jewish ancestry, I have some French ancestry. Once I accepted all that and accepted the history of how I got to be who I am, I felt more comfortable with myself. I made sense to myself. It was very difficult to get my father or any of the older folks to talk about anything they found unpleasant, any experiences they had that were unpleasant. They just sort of seemed to block them out. But I also think it's a cultural thing in that the past almost doesn't exist. It's a kind of fight for survival. The present is everything. There's not even much future.
At Midway, the future is an open question. I was shocked when Charlie told me he wanted to move the plantation, but the reasons are clear enough.
Well, originally this was the Tarboro Road, and it was a wagon track. You know, that was all it was. But now there's 55,000 cars a day go by here. It's like that.
It's horrible.
Yeah. I mean, it's the middle of the afternoon.
The highway noise is one problem, but things are in
combustion system of energy or power generation is that it needs to be holistic. It needs to be a cyclic thing where all the products are reused and recycled in terms of the effect on the environment. But that we can talk about that, and it can be, a perfect world, but we have to deal with the practical world that we live in.
Like from a simple scientific point of view, like I'm just, like a relatively a novice engineer, even though I went to 10 colleges. I haven't worked at too many engineering jobs, but it's very easy to store the carbon that we can grow. Right. And so the carbon that is absorbed from photosynthesis, it's easy. Just stockpile the wood that's left over from turpentine production. And, like if you want to cool off the planet,
grow some trees.
Yeah, it is easy.
Well, since zero-point energy is a convergent energy conversion process, convergent meaning cooling, it is by nature cooling. As a matter of fact, that could be one of the chief problems that we deal with. We'd have to resolve the energy balance because it is inherently cooling.
You mean just when we have global warming, we have...
We could cool through zero-point energy. And
if you drew energy from the vacuum, it's a cooling process.
It will cool the mass that's present in the area, although, the energy stream of conversion isn't intuitively obvious, but it will produce a cooling effect.
Well, if you build up the population the way Bach is talking, these processes of energy use are all going to have to be balanced. I mean, if you really...
the easiest way to cool the planet is to store vegetable oil.
Store vegetable. Yeah.